no veas, a Sevilla. Y al último que cuando ya salió la bien de regla.
It is Sunday on Raid Shadow Legends, but you knew that. Now, with the recent release of Losan K'Leth for the Knights Revenant faction, is the 12th month of this game receiving Faction Unity Legendary Champions, one for each faction, starting with Aslan the Stalwart for Bannerlords, and moving methodically all the way to the Knights Revenant where we are at now. But despite the fact that all of these are considered to be well above average compared to the average Ancient Shard available legendary, you simply don't see many of these, whether in Arena or recommended for teams or otherwise. And why is this? And I believe there is not just one reason for why this is the case, but 4 of them. And those 4 reasons are availability, faction limitations, the Teox problem, as I like to call it, and future FOMO. Now, starting with availability, Faction Unity champions are only available during 2 summoning events each month, otherwise they are not obtainable at all. There is no way to get them. This is either a 10x on Ancient Shards or Sacred Shards, which you may or may not have a stockpile for, depending on what else has pulled your attention. And the other one will be a Prism Shard summon pool. And unless you are either saving up in the way where you don't even click the summon pool tab from one month to the next at all, you only really get 2 Prism Shards every time this is around, and if you want more than that, you have to pay for them. Now, I know what game this is, and many people are very happy to pay this sort of thing because Prism Shards are basically cheaper Sacred Shards with a better chance of getting the headline champion at the time. Now, Cheshire Cat is a faction unity, but it's just the example we have right now in terms of how it's a 2% chance from a Sacred as opposed to anything else. But many, that's a bit off-putting, especially if for Ancients and Sacred it is tied into a Champ Chase or Summon Rush, where once you max out all of the milestone rewards for that, you naturally are going to feel discouraged to keep going if you didn't get the champion you wanted. So at that point, you either decide you stump up because it's not coming around again until much later on when there is a midweek progressive that is, as the CCs all call, bait, or you just do without. I mean, you've seen for a few times where I've either gone to 10,000 a Champ Chase and I didn't get them, or in the case of Volcanos few more, I did actually get him pretty early on. Random is random. Anyway, so, and Volcanos is actually a good example here in terms of how faction limitations is either something that they work well with or not at all. Because Volcanos really only needs one faction ally for his most important effect, and the rest past that are not as necessary, given how this is more of a off-roll damage dealer as opposed to just a HP burn bot. But if we look at some of the more recent ones, like Tribune Herakletes, he's designed mostly for Arena, yet Undead Hordes just doesn't have many good Arena champions nowadays. Most of them are limited or outdated. I mean, sure, there's Rotos, Sithy, Ultimate Death Knight, and some niche picks like Necra or Volcanon, but he doesn't have a great choice to work with in that regard, especially when he really is balanced more around the 3 faction allies effect. The same is true for Swarmspeaker Zyclic. His 3 faction allies effects are really strong, but out of all of these, who are you pairing him with for Arena? That's a thing. Now, it's not as much the case for Losan K'Leth because he has 2 mythicals to choose from: Ankura, Narcissus, Queen of Hearts, Georgid, etc. There's quite a few to choose from here, but one thing that stops me with pulling for them is they will look at, say, Tribune Herakletes, and if they don't have Siphi, they don't have Necrit, etc., they think, well, there's no point spending my shards on someone I can't use to their full potential, so they just don't bother at all. And this is especially true for Aragaz World King, where, again, his Faction Eyes effects are really strong, but in terms of what Orcs has, both the Mythicals are not some of the stronger ones in the game. They have a uses, but like, personally, I don't have Raka, I don't have Warlord, I don't have Garrel, so I can't really do a whole lot with Aragaz if I did pull him, so that's why I just didn't bother. And that is what will put people off pulling for them. Now, I know that in terms of Bolent Free Walker, Skinwalkers has gotten a lot of love lately in terms of champions they can use, but Bolent was quite unpopular. And that leads us to the third point, the Teox problem. Now, as you probably know, Zyclic the Noxious was not very popular. He was a PvE champion similar to any other poison HP burn bots, and many people just didn't feel the need to shell out loads of money for someone that they weren't really going to use, especially if they didn't have many great Ogryns to use with him. And many they would be using just like Yugo or who else even is there? Like Gerda? I mean, there's Stock now, but Stockers was months later. And Gregor was another one who undersold because they released him before they made all of these Asgard Divide barbarians like Odin, Freyja, Loki, etc. So when both of these undersold, that's when Teox came along, and Teox was an absolute monstrosity in terms of what this champion can do. I can't even compare his damage to anyone else in the game for the most part, because for the rest of them, there's no comparisons to be made. He enables so much, and he's usable in most areas of the game, including Platinum Arena, which he was an excellent breaker to a lot of defenses for a long time because of his free faction allies effect. So when Teox came and people spent loads for him, I'm sure you saw the videos where Cruzen was going on all of his clanmates' accounts, pulling all their shards and clapping any time that he got a Teox. People would then compare Bolent and Aragaz, etc. to Teox and thought, hang on, if the power level was that high before, why has it dropped now? Yet, why are pull rates and prices for Prism Shards the same? So people just didn't. It's the same for how they compare fusions like Armans and Newt to what we have nowadays and think, if it's still the same amount of points, why are we getting worse champions now than we were before? And that brings us to the last point, which is future FOMO. So what's happening is people are not pulling for Bolent or Aragaz or Zyclic, etc. because they either compare them to Teox or just can't use them to their full potential, and are imagining that what if next month is the next Teox? What if I don't have my shards then, or my monthly budget? Yeah, some people do that. They actually spend only a certain amount each time. They should either not bother or just pay out at that point. And then they are thinking, okay, well, I'll just leave this. Maybe the next one is one who is top tier. Now, Losan K'Leth, I think, is very good, even post his Hydra nerf, where he doesn't get turn meter off his own A2. Unnecessary, but it is what it is. And they'll think, okay, maybe the Dwarves faction unity will be the next Teox. If that isn't, they won't pull. maybe the Shadowkin one will be, etc. And that is why you end up just not seeing some of these, because they're only wanting to pull for Teox or one on Teox's power level, and these aren't them. So yeah, this is why you just don't see some of them as much. And sure, there is a thing of once they're gone, you can't pull from them again unless you want the midweek progressive. But for many people who don't just spend an absolute ton on the game, they just decide, nah, I'll do without. Or in the case of myself, I'll pull to a certain amount from the milestones. If I get them, great. If I don't get them, so be it. I'm not going to chase it. I'll just maybe get it another time, or if I know a friend who has this champion, I'll just play on their account to see what they're like. And yeah. So what should really be done about this sort of thing? Here's the thing. I don't really think anything should be done, mostly on the grounds that I think Plurium has already got a good enough formula for this, and they are happy enough with it how it is in terms of the spenders wailing for these Unity champions or anyone else who has moments of weakness. And the midweek progressives are about the only compromise past that. And again, if you don't want them from that, then, well, do without, I guess. So yeah, it's something to think about, and maybe they'll consider it at some point in terms of changing things. I don't think they will. So that's all of that, and I'll let you go, and see ya.